What is a Dragonlord? Or better yet, Skoros ixes aias eldrizas eixio. Well, in short, a dragon lord is someone who rides dragon and is from a very noble family of the Valyrian freehold, which, if you're unaware, most of them died in something known as the Doom of Valryia that took place a long time before the actual events of Game of Thrones, which is roughly about 102 years before Aegon's conquest of Westeros. Now, in this video in particular, I want to explain in depth what a dragon rider is, how it relates to dragon lords, and how I think that could affect this new House of the Dragon series. Before I jump into any of that, please do me a massive favor, and if you're enjoying my content, slap a like on this video, as the like goal is going to be 42. Get it? And also, make sure you subscribe and turn those notifications all the way on. So that way, you'll get an alert every single time I drop a video throughout the wait for House of the Dragon Season 1, or as it's known on this channel, the Long Nights! Now, before I get into the meat of this video, so to speak, I need to do some side-splaining, and that's basically that a lot of the way George R. R. Martin writes these books that are history books, they're not part of the main A Song of Ice and Fire series. Well, they are. They're just not in, like the main storyline, right? So these take place, hundreds, sometimes thousands of years before the main storyline. So they're written much like history books. So the way George writes these books is open for interpretation. So if you want to sort of make any definitive conclusions, it's impossible. You don't really know what happened, much like real life history. It was too long ago, and if there's no written record, well, then the history is written by the victor. But I think it's interesting, a most accepted theory is that the Doom of Valryia was caused by some sort of massive explosion. Like, obviously, the society, the Valyrian freehold, reached this massive technological point and then blew up. Like, obviously, they were doing something in George's world. They were doing something that involved harnessing the power of dragons, harnessing the power of fire magic itself, and they sort of lost control of their song, if you will. Like, their song being a song of fire. And then over in Westeros, we have a song of ice. I guess this is a good point to mention this. A lot of people think that Dragonstone is, like, the one Valyrian freehold, or, sorry, the one westernmost Valyrian trading post, and that was obviously established before Aegon was born, and that's where the Valyrians of ancient would trade with the Westerosis of ancient times. Well, there's also this thing known as the High Tower, which was not a thing on the Game of Thrones TV show. It will be in this new series, because obviously we have Alicent High Tower and Sir Otto High Tower, but basically it's rumored by some maesters. Now, there's a certain maester who thinks it was built by underground sea people, but there's one maester in particular who swears that the base of the High Tower, because of its its similarities to Dragonstone and its similarities to the Sea Stone chair, that it was built by Valyrians. So obviously, if Valyrians had built something much older than Dragonstone like High Tower, they had been coming to Westeros a lot longer than what we thought. And that's interesting, because the rumor that the Maester sort of provides as evidence to that is that he mentions that some of the Valyrians that came over here that were trading with Westeros started doing so because they heard that the doom of man would come from the land beyond the Narrow Sea. So they thought if they could get a foothold over here, they could sort of figure out what's going on in Westeros. That relates back to what I was saying earlier about the Valyrians and the Targaryens, Dragonlords, Dragon Riders, their song being the song of fire. And then over in Westeros, we have the Starks, we have the First Men, we have the Children of the Forest, we have all the nameless old gods, right? So that's the song of ice. And the two of those are going to obviously meet. I think the trick behind George's story, much like with Lord of the Rings, where each race is given a ring, the rings of power, whatever, goes to certain races, and the elves use them for certain things, the dwarves use them for certain things, and then men are corrupted by them, right? So it's similar to George's story, except for it's not so much laid out, right? So he has people of ice and people of fire, and if they play their song correctly and don't let it sort of like play over the page or something like that, then they'll get all of the benefits of it, right? So they have to have their song and keep it in balance. But I don't know. You all let me know what you think down below. If you think that ancient Valyrian Dragonlords came over to Westeros much earlier than we thought, when building that Dragonstone trading post. But another interesting theory, and this sort of ties into what I want to mention about House of the Dragon, is that there's a certain point in the Fire and Blood history book where it's mentioned, and I don't know who's read what and who's watching this video, so I'll just say that a certain Targaryen, Arya, it decides that she's bored. She goes bored of her life on Dragonstone and wants to be a dragon rider and just go see the fucking world. So one day she decides to hop on the back of Balerion, and Balerion takes her ass to the Valyrian Freehold, or at least that's where we suspect. She's gone for quite a while, and when she returns, it's tragically insane. She's got fireworms in her skin. She's got burns all over her. Her skin is literally so hot, it's smoking, and it's like smoldering. It's nuts. It's a really crazy image from the Fire and Blood book. It's insane, and this I don't think is going to happen on House of the Dragon. It happens too soon before the events of the Dance of the Dragon, but it could be referenced and it could be mentioned. And my whole point in mentioning all that is that I believe that, there was a race of godlike creatures, right? You had ice like god creatures and fire like god creatures. So the fire like god creatures obviously mated, so to speak, with Valyrians. The Valyrians were shepherds at one point, and they built this great society. So, a lot of people think that since George is a heavy sci-fi writer, basically Ice and Fire is actually a spaceship. And fire types science technology is what influenced the Valyrians, and obviously they call it magic because they don't have an understanding of it. And then an ice type spaceship landed over in Westeros, and obviously all of the first peoples over there didn't really know what it was, and they called it ice magic, right? So those different groups of people were given these super technologies, and then over thousands of years they advanced, and all these different magical creatures are genetic manipulations through DNA of trying to figure out how to become closer to God. That's something that men tried to do, in this day and age in the real world. So maybe, the theory is basically that's George's world is basically a sci-fi sort of is set in a sci-fi backdrop. So if you believe in that, and you believe that, he's sort of giving us clues to what happened to Arya Targaryen, clearly someone kidnapped a Valyrian Targaryen dragon riding girl and tried to do certain things to her. They tried to maybe possibly have a fireworm mate with her, and their offspring would be these Valyrian Dragonlords of Ancient that were said to have lived for a really long time. Well, if you look it up, the ancient god emperors of Yi reigned for thousands of years. Obviously, the Valyrian Dragon Riders didn't just come out of nowhere. It makes much more sense if they were given some sort of ancient technology by a people that, much like the Valyrians are in the main storyline, wipe the fuck away. Maybe that's what happened with the Valyrians of old. Maybe they were passed down the dragon riding magic and the dragon riding technology, so to speak, and that's how they sort of advanced, and maybe that's where they were able to genetically manipulate some of their people to live for a really long time. We do know that dragons live for a long time, and maybe where Balerion took Arya is somewhere where sort of like a lost peoples, discovered that technology and they were trying to recreate it. I don't know. At this point, I'm going to get the fuck out of here. The last thing I want to mention is that House of the Dragon, they need, Valyrian Dragonlords are said to use ancient. They had a lot more ability to use magic, right? So they would use binding spells, they would use horns, they would use whips to control their dragon. Now, obviously, I know that not every single Targaryen on this prequel series is going to be a fucking wizard, so it would make sense if maybe we got a little bit of horn play, maybe a whole bunch of whip play. There needs to be saddles. They need to have way more control over these dragons than Daenerys had of hers. Well, I don't thank you all so much for watching. My name is Mark, and this has been Sir Unce Long Night Reviews. Slap a like on it. Like goal on this video is going to be 420.